And you can actually do that with the power off to be on the safe side so you don't accidentally short this out. Okay, so now you can see our little assembly here, which is really not, it's not super complicated at all. It's a little bit challenging to do neatly, but once this is all said and done, you won't really see much of this anyway, because the light will be blinding most of the time anyway. Okay, so now you can kind of get things situated the way you'd like it to look. Okay, and then when you're all said and done, you've got this nice little LED bank. Okay, you can tidy up your wires however you see fit. And then, like, I don't like that little tail, so I'd really like to get that cleaned up just a bit better. These are a little sharper, so I'll take these ones to do that step. Okay, so we're going to get in there between those two. It doesn't seem like I'm getting in there far enough. Oh, what can I use to get in there? I can probably just live with it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to size this, and I'll get you back into focus here, guys. So we'll just power this up. Now I noticed that this is a little bit dim, so I'm wondering if our battery is low. So before we actually resize anything, I'll just grab another one of my junk batteries. And when I say junk batteries, I mean they still work. They aren't good enough to run a motor under full load, so I just keep them until they catch on fire. That's a joke, guys. I don't actually catch them on fire. Okay, so you can see there's quite a bit more voltage there. It's probably in the low voltage area there. And looky there, guys. That's a little bright, a little better. And as you can see, that's going to be a very good tail light. Now we can go ahead and give it a little bit of bending just to make sure it doesn't break contact immediately. Now that we have that, we can go ahead and also test for heat. It's not hot, guys, not hot. But we got to let it cook for a minute, meaning we're going to leave it on for just a minute or two. Okay, great. While that's cooking, and we'll go ahead and get the red and green LEDs prepped. And the way we're going to do that is pretty simple, but let me get cleaned up. Alright guys, so just clean up this little area so I can work a little safer on this. This resistor hasn't even warmed up at all. I'm totally satisfied with the light level. So at this point, I'll actually unplug the current limiting resistor. And this is what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll just stick that in there so I don't forget which one's which. And I'll lay this aside somewhere else. Okay, so it's going to be over here to remind me that's for the tail. And we'll be coming back to that shortly. And yes, I do realize I'm working on the wings right now, but the tail is part of the lighting project, so I'm going to get all the lighting done right now. Alright, so the way we desolder these is pretty straightforward, guys. It's a little bit easier than those white ones, and plus you can buy these. You don't have to wait for your father-in-law to take apart a sign. Usually I take an X-Acto knife, number 11, just a regular one. Clean the tip really good. And then what I'll do is I'll actually get up under the actual bottom of the LED. Just like this. Just kind of almost lift it up, but you won't lift it until you desolder it, okay? Well, I mean you can, but you don't want to. Okay, now get the heat to heat. Okay. Okay, so we got that lifted. So once it's lifted, you can kind of fold this over. But actually, at this point, probably be a good idea to go ahead and make a small mark on there. Now, these things are marked, but this little triangle, there's a little triangle on there, guys. I'm going to get it to focus. If it's the last thing I do, guys, it's going to be the last thing I do. I'm going to get this stupid thing to focus. So, if you look right here, yes, there's a little triangle right there, okay? So, I believe that means negative, but I'm not 100% certain because I swear there's other times I've done it and it's not actually been that side. So what I'm doing is I'm just marking the side that I know is negative because I know it from testing on earlier on in this experiment here. When I say experiment, I say that term loosely. Okay, so now that we have one side desoldered, we should just be able to kind of crease this in half. Now they will get hot, so be careful you don't hurt yourself. A little flux, clean it in the mechanical area there. Just touch the side, get that solder cleaned up. Hot, and then throw it off, okay? And then the same thing here. Now if you're doing 3 of these at 12 volts, you can use this 331 ohm resistor, the surface mount, if you can get it desoldered properly. My guess is you probably have a heck of a time doing that. There are better methods and better irons to use for desoldering. This is what I have, and that's why I use it. There's almost always a better way to do something. So if you're watching a YouTube video, guys, you can't always expect people are going to have the best tool. Okay? Tip it up. I'll rotate this around so I got the blunt end toward my finger. Try not to stab yourself. Hold it up, okay? So now that that's separated, continue the crease. While we've got it kind of easy to hold, we'll go ahead and clean this edge up. Just touch that real quick, let the solder melt, and we can drop this. The other thing is you can buy these SMD LEDs if you want to. So you don't have to desolder them and everything, but to be perfectly honest, I don't want to go to DigiKey and order that stuff. What a pain in the butt. Okay, so now the next thing I got to do is get a wire on there, and these LEDs are a little bit narrower than they are wide, and so what's going to happen is they'll be kind of side by side like this, and then I'll mount them in such a way that I can wrap it like that. Okay, so it'll kind of flank the top and bottom of the wing surface. So it's going to be, one's going to be mounted kind of like here, and then the other one's going to be mounted kind of like here, okay? And then I'll use the glue to be the lens, okay? So we want to make sure the negative and the negative line up, and that the positive and positive line up. Okay, so we got those sitting side by side. Want to make sure there's a little bit of a gap, and I may cut those into the wing surface just a little bit. Okay, so we got those side by side. Probably should have just done it right there, but didn't think about it in time. I got this isn't double-sided tape, by the way. It's just a regular masking tape that I pulled off the roll and folded around. Okay, so now what am I going to use for wires on this? This is a little bit different application because we have to come down here, and we're going to go all the way out to the wingtip, which really isn't like an especially long run, but you don't want to go so huge. So I may try to do this same wire again, just for the simple fact that I've evidently already used this blue and black one. So I'll pull those out and see how they look. Yeah. Now the only thing I don't like about this blue and black style here is that it's going to show up really good against the white wing, and so I'm going to see it. So I'm just going to look at what I've got here, and I'm just going to put them all the tips together like this, and I'm just going to pull them out and see if there's any two that are the same length. Looks like there's a blue and a blue. That would be a travesty to try to do that. So I'm maybe not going to use those colors on this one. I got a black and a white here, so I'll go with those. Okay, so I got a black and white. Let's see if we got enough length on that. Just like what I had before, but not twisted together yet. That's about the same length. But guys, I've learned my lesson. Don't try to shortchange yourself on wire. That's just a waste of your time. You're not going to be able to reach with this, so that's no good. Alright, I'm going to keep looking for wire. We'll come right back. Alright guys, so I got some wire here. We're going to use the black and yellow wire. So nothing real particularly special there about the black and yellow. I would have preferred to use a lighter color because it would blend with the wing better, but we're going to end up taping over this anyway. So we'll take and just lay them out and just kind of figure out about how much we need to reach both sides. And we'll strip off just almost exactly what we need, knowing that when we heat this up with a soldering iron, it's going to shrink back a little bit as well. Okay, so when we tin these leads, in other words. So just give them a couple of twists. You don't have to twist them, but it just kind of makes it a little easier. Okay, so now the negative side is back here. We have a black mark on that. This autofocus is awesome. Hey, look at that, guys. So we'll just do the yellow up here. Okay, so we need to hold that down in that position there. And I don't even care if I melt the tape. Just want to make sure that I get a good solder joint. So ideally, I will just be able to more or less put these in position where I want them and then kind of heat things up. Even though it's going to try to burn everything, I don't care. I'm sure there's probably a better way, and if there is, I'll try it someday. So I didn't tell you guys, but while I was cleaning up, I sucked my other soldering tip up into the vacuum, so I get to go digging for that here in a minute. That's going to be fun. Can't wait. That'd make like a 3 or 4 part video. Just kidding. Okay, so on the underside, alright, so we got the first one attached, it's moving, it's picked up, and then the second one we gotta kind of get this thing to lift up so we can get the wire under it, because the contact is actually kind of on the bottom. So technically, if we were able to push down on it, we should be able to get this to work pretty quick. Yep, and it's done on that side. Okay, so we have the positive side done. Now that the positive side is done, we can go ahead and evaluate for any necessary trimming like that. And that wire is what it is for now. Now the negative side, we just have to remember we don't have a current limiting resistor picked out yet. So we'll have to, oh, this is red, it's always obscenely strange. The green one and the white one is always pretty easy, but then the red ones for whatever reason are always giving me problems with needing less resistance to be at equivalent brightness. Okay, cool. So this time I'm going to do this a little different. I'm going to hold this back here. I'm just going to kind of put those wires very close together and then kind of make it go where it wants to go, so that when it's relaxed, it will make a good contact. And that way all I have to do is just now touch. It's always easier on the second one there. Okay, a little bit of flux. Okay, got that. Alright, so now we should be able to test these lights. And we'll be able to get our little fold in there without any problems. Alright, so now before we can test these, of course, we're going to have to tin the wires so that we can... Oh, they're already tinned, it looks like, on these ones. Must have already done some testing on these. So we'll plug in the positive to the positive side, and then the negative side will go into one of these rows on the breadboard. This is called a breadboard, guys. Actually, I don't know why they're called a breadboard. It's kind of a weird name. I should know that, but I don't. Okay, so now let's talk about resistors. We used 100 for the other one, so let's start a little bigger. Let's go to 220. So this is 220 ohms. Okay, so we plug that in to the same row. Now we're going to go across negative. And it's on. Just not very bright at all. Okay? So that's unacceptably not bright. So now if you use two resistors in parallel, meaning you just put one here in the same points, then you would get half exactly the resistance, or very close to half exactly. Okay? And that's usually what I'll do, is I'll just test it that way, because it's really easy to grab another 220 ohm. Well, of course I don't have another 220 ohm this size. So what I'll do is I'll come over to my smaller stuff, and we'll try 180 ohm resistor, okay? 180 is smaller than 220, correct guys? Yes it is. But you can do 180 plus 220 divided by 2 equals brighter, brighter, brighter. I don't know if you guys can tell on that. I'm going to block those flashing lights back there. Brighter, brighter. Okay, now what also happens is that you're going to end up with more current going through a little resistor like this, so it may not be appropriate. So I'm going to hold this back for the green. And then so far we haven't damaged anything, so I'm going to jump down to a little bit smaller. Let's try 68 ohms. Might be a little bit small. Let's try 82 ohms, okay? So here's an 82 ohm, 1/8 of a watt resistor. Now, you'll notice I have two of these, and the reason I'm doing that is so that I don't damage this right away, because if you do it too much, you'll damage it. Okay? That's a lot brighter. It's a lot brighter. Now, you guys can't tell in the video, okay? But, I mean, just because it glows through my thumb like that doesn't mean it's like super, super bright. This is not going to be very bright compared to the green, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pull this resistor out, the 220 ohm. I'm not a big fan of constantly having to test resistors, and these color codes, whatever this batch was, the color code just was weird. It wasn't what I'm used to for standard. And then these are just too dang small, so. Okay, so we're going to put that in. And then we have to do a temperature test, meaning I'm going to hold it. Hopefully it doesn't get too hot. Now, if you put a resistor in parallel, meaning, you know, touching the legs together, and then you got the resistor here together, then you will have half the resistance. But if you put them in series, you'll have double the resistance. So you can kind of guess and check, or if you've just got one particular size, you can kind of get a lot done with that. That's not a bad size. I actually I'm not crazy about the brightness, but I think I'm going to go with that. This is a 68 ohm, or excuse me, an 82 ohm. So we'll just go with that. We'll let that cook for a minute, and we'll come right back. I'm going to get two wires to do with the green, and we'll desolder these and come right back. Alright guys, so basically we did the same thing to the green as we did to the red. And what I've done is I've matched up the resistors so that the brightness is as close as I can get. I got a 470 ohm resistor for the two greens, and then I have a 51 ohm resistor to go for the two reds. And what that does for me is it gives me the maximum brightness before it becomes getting hot, or it starts getting hot to the point where you wouldn't really be able to comfortably hold it, which means it's over 150 degrees, which means it's going to deteriorate the quality of the LED brightness, and the plastic will start to melt, so they'll fail. But that gives us what we need for sizing. Now we should just be able to go ahead and start mounting them to the wings, so we'll go ahead and pick it up next there. Alright guys, so we got the green and the red done, and I misspoke. I ended up using a 50 ohm resistor here. It was actually an 80 some odd ohm resistor. I'd mixed them up, sorry about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect these one at a time, putting the resistor with each piece so that it's not easily confused, because there will be coming a time to be confused here pretty soon. Okay, so I'm just going to twist it around the negative wire here. The negative wire on this one, they're both blue, but this one has a white stripe. It's hard to tell on the green wires, or the green LEDs. Okay, so now the other thing is we have to determine which side's which. So obviously my plane is taken apart right now, so it's confusing, or easy to confuse. So this actually becomes the wing that goes over on that side of the plane, and it's upside down. So if you were to visualize this, it'd be the green light, okay? So just to double check, triple check. Okay, we're looking from the top, and that is the right wing, which is going to be green, okay? So we'll go ahead and put the green on this one first. We're just going to go straight to that. We're not going to mess with anything else until we get that done. Got foam safe glue, medium, and then we got some kicker. And we'll go ahead and get the cap off and ready to go. And then we'll get the cap off and ready to go for this. Now, the other day I dropped and spilled a bunch of this, which is super annoying. But luckily I have quite a bit of it back there. I think I've got 2 bottles of it. Okay, so this is going to end up here, and so the rationale behind getting this glued in first is just so we can determine exactly where we want to put the resistor. The resistor will go somewhere between here and there, or right in between where we cut this to interrupt the line. So not sure where that's going to be, but it'll be somewhere back here. So you can kind of see this starting to come together now, the way this is going to fit. So just looking at it, it's going to be something like this, where it points mostly down, and we're going to go about midway between. This is where it starts to fold back, and that's where it's going to go. And it's going to be mostly down and then somewhat forward. Because, I mean, we don't fly upside down that frequently that we would need to have it constantly pointed up. And we're not going to be trying to see it from that angle too often. So we'll take this X-Acto knife. We'll actually cut a small relief. Make sure we're not tangled on anything. And I'll actually pull this out a little bit to give us a little more extra length for supporting this wing. Okay, so we got a mark there where we had already pressed in a little bit. So we'll just go ahead and take and cut just a little wedge out. Hardly any. Okay, and this is where being nitpicky is going to pay dividends. Okay, so we got that. Alright, so then we can try to reset this back in there, see how things look. Okay, so you see my preferential treatment is going to be pointing it forward. Okay, and that's going to look really nice when that's in there. So let's go ahead and get that glued. And then this is where I just kind of double, triple check everything as I go. Because if you make a mistake here, like for instance, these are green, and that's on the right side wing. I have glued them in the wrong wing before. That's really frustrating. So that's definitely the right wing. And that's the right wing, and it's upside down. Okay. See, now if I do it wrong, I will have said it like multiple times, and you want to call some sort of a brain doctor. Okay, so we'll just let that set in the glue. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and spritz a little bit of the kicker in there. Okay, and then we'll just kind of work it. Just hold it where we want it. Doesn't need to be perfect at this point, but we do need to have it contained so it stays put. And we'll come back in and put a bunch more glue on that later. Okay, so you can see we'll be somewhat pointed up, but mostly pointed down and mostly pointed forward. Okay, now that we have that in position, we'll go ahead and get a little bit of glue in this joint where it's going to be weak, mechanically weak. Remember, just a little bit. We don't want to get too crazy, because later on we'll actually point the wing where we want it, and then we can get the drips to kind of fill out and make our desired effect. Okay, so now we get these wires over here, and we can go the straightest path possible, or we can jog down to where this carbon fiber strip is and then kind of right along there. I think that's probably the more wise decision. Yeah, and that'll kind of line up neatly with stuff. So if I end up doing a piece of vinyl tape in addition to what's already been provided, I can just use that. So that's what we'll do. I guess I could go at an angle, but I think this is going to look better, and then later on if I decide to paint it, the wingtips a little more, I'll have an easy way of hiding that. So now what I'll do for this is just super obvious and simple. I'll just take a sharp knife and I'll just make a slice. And then come back and just do a sharp knife and make a slice. And then I'll come back in and just do that back and forth until I get the little wedge out. And flip the knife upside down. And that's going to really give us somewhere to put the wire. Okay. Now you're probably thinking that's going to weaken your plane. Of course it will. You would be correct, but not enough to make a difference. So now we can tuck that down in there and we can just glue it. And no, you wouldn't have to make a groove, you just tape it on the top if you want, but I prefer to have a little more strength and protection for the wires. And then also I can totally protect that now with a thin layer of CA. Which makes it super fun to fix if there's ever a problem, by the way, in case you're wondering. Okay, so we'll get that into that channel, and we'll just give it one little spritz of the CA kicker. Now you guys have probably seen me do where I'll take, and I'll cut a piece of paper towel and strengthen a piece of foam. You could do that too if you wanted to put it over there. Okay, so now these two wires, I'm going to just make sure they're not bumping, making a big bump here. So we'll just run that down. And usually what I'll do is I'll tack it at its destination. But in this case, I'll just go ahead and run down right there because I've already got it glued most of the way down here. Just run a little bit of CA, no kicker yet, and we'll take this rag and we'll just wipe that down the length. Okay, then we can go ahead and do a little kicker. Follow it up again. Alright, so that should be held in place, and then of course we'll tape over it. But that'll hold it nice and steady for us while we're working. Now we want to kind of reposition things so it doesn't all fall on itself, which is really frustrating if that happens. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is exit out of here somewhere that we can get straight across, or as straight as we can without causing lots of grief for ourselves. Okay, and you see it's kind of loose right there. The glue isn't super effective when you do a thin layer like that, but I'm just making a channel is all I'm doing. Nothing complicated about this at all. This time I'm actually going a little bit smaller yet than what I had done before. You can do this in 2 cuts, you can do it in 3 cuts, or whatever it takes. I'm going to do it probably in 3 cuts on this one. And then rather than use the knife, I'm going to get, well, I'm going to unplug this. Get this little plastic desoldering tool that seems to work pretty good for stuff like this. It's got this weird like open end down here. See, and it just pulls it up nicely. You could just run the wire right on the surface, so you don't have to cut a groove at all. This would be a whole lot more detrimental structurally than this. But again, I think it's of little concern, or I wouldn't be doing it. And once we're done with this one, guys, I'll let you just kind of figure it out on the other side too. Then we'll jump into the tail light once I get done with the other side. Okay, so we can go ahead and lay this out. This LED, there's some double-sided, this tape is sitting here, so I'll stick it there so it doesn't go away from me. Okay, so now just a little bit more glue to kind of get this thing held in position. It's just regular medium CA, Bob Smith Industries. Nothing too fancy. Use a Q-tip to control that fluid. That was not probably the most wise decision to walk away from that before it set up at all. We'll just hold that where we want it to be and just run it down the length like that. Just a little bit of kicker. Okay, so you can see how this process is going to work. And then, of course, here in just mere moments, we're going to be able to go ahead and get this completed in. Now, getting around this little bend can sometimes be challenging for the simple fact that you don't want to have a big bump here. But let's just be real, it's not really that big of a bump anyway. So you can go around it, or you can do whatever you want to do. In my case, I don't know if I really care. I think I'm just going to jump over the top for once. No, I'm going to go around it. So I'm just going to make a little slice this time. And we'll see how that works. Now that time I didn't cut out a wedge. That was on purpose. We'll take the first wire that kind of walk it into the crack.